Well, as they say, it's always better to have the applause first. It's been a fascinating day. I've enjoyed every moment of it, and I'm sure you have as well. There are just a few points that I picked up, which I thought were worth thinking about. The first is in terms of diagnosis of parental alienation. We've been critical of CAFCAS for being slow to recognize it. They now do. But there's a saying that we see what we know. In other words, if you see parental alienation and you know it, then you can diagnose it. When you walk into a crowded room like this, you see a sea of faces, and one or two faces you know. You recognize Paula Prida. That's a diagnosis, you see. And that happens with various other things. And in medicine, if you see a constellation of symptoms, you know the diagnosis. And it's really an education thing that we need to take forward. In terms of understanding a family dynamic, there's a very simple question, and this applies to parental alienation. Who has the symptoms? Who has the problem? When we deal with a parental alienated child, the child clearly has the symptoms. They come out with hateful remarks, they are beastly to people, they're beastly to extended family, etc., 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 all without any good cause. Where does it come from? It comes from the person with the problem. The person with the problem is the alienating parent who is attacking the target parent. So it's helpful to think of that, the two things simultaneously. Here is the child who's got the symptoms, and there is the parent who's got the problems. I think it's also come out today subtly around the room that parental alienation is not a gender issue. Although in this room, the majority of the cases are where a mother has got residence of the children and is poisoning them against the father, do please always, in your discourse with others outside, make sure that the listener to you knows that it's not a gender issue. It occurs in intact families, as Stephen Wildblood was hinting at. It occurs against paternal grandparents, 300,000 of whom are alienated from their children. Men do it too, and there are men who have custody of children who inculcate alienated views. I've even known non-resident parents do it. In other words, the parent who hasn't got the children, the child goes on a contact visits at weekends, and that non-resident parent then poisons the child against their own family. And it also occurs, and this is the most troubling of all, in those cases that do get to court, there is appropriate shared parenting ordered, there's appropriate shared parenting in place, but the alienating behavior continues with the parent who has been the alienator all along. And when the other parent has to see the children, they are greeted by these horrible children who say dreadful things, and it takes 12, 24 hours, sometimes until the child returns to normal. I've got 5 points, and then I shall stop because I'm watching the clock. Any family that comes to me concerned about contact issues and residence issues, there's a prime guiding light, and that is that we should have a presumption of normality for the children and both parents. And that presumption of normality is essential because what we're trying to do when parents separate, we don't want to divorce the kids, because the temptation in the present system is that the parents separate and then the child gets divorced from one or other parent as well. We want to have a presumption of normality. And really, a child should only be denied contact with either parent if it passes something close to, or in my view, up to the public law test. It has to go with that threshold. The second point I wanted to mention is wishes and feelings. Wishes and feelings, it says the ascertainable wishes and feelings. When Michael Lefkowitz asked me to come here today, I told him, well, I didn't actually tell him, but I thought, I wish I didn't have to go to Holloway on Saturday, I have other things planned. I wish I didn't have to go. Well, why did I come? Because I was told I bloody well did have to come, and I obeyed the higher authority. Don't take a bow, Michael, just yet. In other words, children will often say, I don't want to go to school, as André said, I don't want to go to bed, I don't want to do my homework. I phoned my grandson the other day. No, I was at home. My grandson phoned me the other day. He's 9. I just sent him a letter and a prize for doing something quite well, a little monetary gift. And I said, hello, James, nice to speak to you. Why are you phoning me up? He said, because I've been told to. In other words, it is normal for children to be told to do things. And we as professionals and we as parents, we must all remember it's quite normal for children to be told to do things. They're children. And as they get older, so you can take their age and understanding into account. That's also in the Children Act. So wishes and feelings. If you are with a child who is expressing extreme wishes against seeing another parent, you sit down with them and you say, now, I can see that. It must be awful having these strong feelings. But a long, long, long time ago, there must have been a time when you were very, very tiny, when things weren't quite as bad as that, and that the beastliness was less. And because you've done your research beforehand, you could say, I wonder whether, when you went to the beach at such and such, and you played with that boat, and you went out paddling on the lake, and so on. And they suddenly come to life as they remember that, and they say, oh yes, that was good. And I said, obviously Mummy was there, and who else? Who was rowing the boat? Well, Daddy was rowing the boat, and then my sister fell in the water, etc. And they suddenly come to life, and you can recognize that there are these two things. So wishes are often the spoken utterances, and feelings are what you're looking for down beneath the surface. The next point is, in my view, as a child psychiatrist who's done lots of assessment for court work, it is not an assessment if you don't see all the parties, if you don't see the child, and in particular, it's not a proper assessment if you don't see the child with the target parent. What happens is that you do your preliminary assessment, and then go to court and you say, I need a court order, but we will go and have a meeting between the child and the target parent. And they say, how can that be? How can that be possible? One tiny vignette, I know I've only got 120 seconds. A child aged 9 living in Ruislip, an improbable place, but people live in Ruislip, no offence to Ruislip, told me that her father was moved into the flat opposite at night and had a very high velocity rifle with one of these laser sights, and Mummy would go out on the balcony and this laser sight would come on her, and she was afraid that Daddy was going to shoot and kill Mummy with this laser sight. So I said, yes, now that would be a mistake, wouldn't it? Because Mummy's good and she takes you to school. And then Daddy comes at night and he puts matches through the letterbox and tries to set fire to our flat. I said, what an appalling thing to do. And then one day Daddy came and he took the tyres off Mummy's car and he put cocaine parcels inside the wheels, and Mummy was caught by the police and she was taken for having cocaine in her tyres. Really? That's really dreadful. All this in Ruislip. Now you see, I'm very gullible, so of course I believe that completely. But I said, alongside the guardian who was working with me, I think actually, we really ought to go and meet Daddy. I suggest we do that on Saturday morning. And what we'll do is we'll go to Hanger Lane to the 10-pin bowling arena, because we like 10-pin bowling and I need a bit of practice. I don't want to come. I said, that's fine. I know you don't want to come. I don't want to come either. But let's both agree we're going to go even if we don't want to go. So, not having seen her father for 2 years, saying that her father was trying to kill her mother, set fire to the flat, and she hated him, etc., etc. I was there with the guardian of the father, and the door opened, that green door there, and in came the father, and she rushed across the room to see him. I'm glad to say that the guardian and I defeated the father and the girl at 10-pin bowling. But the point is that we not only did 10-pin bowling, but we had lunch together, and we had a long chat, and it was a 4-hour assessment session. And the reason that we did 10-pin bowling is that if I sit in a white-walled room on a chair with a father, seeing how the father gets on with the child, I don't know about the father and the child, but I get extremely nervous and uncomfortable. So you want to do something that is normal. So assessing the child is essential. And in all the cases that I've seen, actually assessing the child in those circumstances is fine. One other one, the child was alleging that in Germany, this was another 9-year-old, his stepmother was making him massage her with contraceptive ointments and things every Friday when the father got a supply of 10 kilos of the stuff. And he came to London and told his mother on a contact visit that this was occurring, so she reported it, and it was agreed that I should advise. And when I went to visit the mother, she lived in a flat behind locked doors with a bed, and that was all in the room that I could see. She had a singlet on with tattoos up by her arms. And I said, well, look, this child is saying terrible things about you. I think you need a bit of respite in a hospital. So we put her in, the boy into the Park Hospital, Oxford, and where the staff said he was the worst behaved child they'd ever had, and they would resign unless we did something. The mother was living in a house in the grounds and had a constant supply of drugs coming in. And it soon became clear that the person who was actually the sexual abuser was the mother. Anyway, the boy was taken from the hospital to live with the grandmother in Bath, and we said, right, it's time for rehabilitation. And he came to a children's home in London, locked himself in the bathroom, refused to come out on a Saturday. And my colleague knocked on the door and said, I've just turned on the computer and I'm going to be playing a game. Would you like to join me? No, I won't. So he said, well, I'm going to go play a game. And within 10 minutes, the boy had joined him. He said, when is my daddy coming to take me back to Germany? And it was immediate rehabilitation. And from being the worst behaved boy they'd ever had in this adolescent unit, children's unit was actually up to 14. He went back to Germany, caught a school bus at 20 to 7 in the morning, was perfectly all right. And his antisocial behavior was the product of his distress at what he was experiencing and how he was being indoctrinated by his mother, and he was caught in the middle. So seeing children with the non-resident parent is essential. Point 4, it is of limited, if any, help to the court in knowing what to do if an expert assessment or a social work assessment says this is a case of parental alienation, the child doesn't want to see the other parent or be with them, it's over the court to decide. Because the court says, look, I'm the judge, you've got to at least put forward a suggestion that I learned very early on, that my suggestion may be wrong, but at least I've got to suggest something. And so we used to always, I used to, and so did the guardian working with me, work out a plan of rehabilitation. We said, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it. Because there are 2 steps. First of all, you have to work out the plan, and secondly, you have to say who is going to do it. And some of these rehabilitations are quite traumatic with the older children, because the children run away, they insult the therapist, they use their mobile phones to phone their mother, they do all sorts of things. But once you've decided that this is a case of parental alienation and intervention is essential, then you have to draw up a plan and see it through. The weakest link can make that system fail. The weakest link could be the child psychiatrist, could be the guardian ad litem, could be the social worker. It might even be that I got the diagnosis wrong, but that's unusual. But the weakest link in the past has actually been the judge. And I have said in evidence, you're faced with a decision, either we go ahead with this robust rehabilitation system, or you walk away from the child. The judges are outraged and say, how dare you say that? The court will never walk away from the child. It's most unreasonable of you. You consider yourself an expert, Dr. Cameron. I'm quite shocked. 2 hours later, they walk away from the case. And that kind of abandonment and those failures are one of the reasons I got involved in this work. The suspended transfer case was one that Mr. Justice Coleridge, as he then was hearing. I was involved in it. He gave the mother 3 months, and she then abducted the children from their school, took them away to an aunt's house somewhere, and the order was implemented. And it was quite difficult to actually carry it through in practical terms. But once the order was made firmly, the guardian and the expert knew what to do and was able to settle the child in the new home. What is awful, as Stephen Wildblood says, is that in these cases, even with skilled help, you often have got one parent who is the alienator and the target parent. You're living with the alienating parent. You move to the target parent, you get settled in, you are happy, you're well adjusted, and the alienating parent says, I want nothing to do with you, and they walk away. So actually keeping the 2 parents involved in these children's lives is very difficult. How can it be done, I hear you asking me? I hear voices, quite often. And the way it can be done is by early interventions, because if these remedies are introduced early, then within 4, 6, 8, 10 weeks, or even 12 weeks, then you can actually take a grip of the case early. And drift and delay is hugely prejudicial to the child. So there we are, I've spoken enough.
No, thank you very much.